G'day gamers, Aussie Wargamer here in Moree, Australia, and welcome to my channel. Firstly, I just want to apologise for not getting a video out this past week. Just been working out some issues with my camera and trying to get some painting tutorials to you the best that I possibly can. I think I've solved the issue, but and I'll try to get a video out this week, but we'll see how we go. What I want to do on this episode is just have a look at some of the previews from last night's community preview and talk about the miniatures, what I like and why I like them. We're going to talk about the weight of a lot of these miniatures, the balance. We're going to talk about tone. We're going to talk about character. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole preview, just some of the miniatures that I really like. And we're going to start with this guy because he is my favorite miniature from what they revealed last night. Now, obviously, I'm very keen for a Soulblight battle tome because Soulblight is the army that I am working on at the moment and the army that I will be taking to CanCon in 2022. And so having a Soulblight battle tome will be fantastic. Now, obviously, that wasn't revealed, but we've got these fantastic vampire miniatures, which tells me that Soulblight is probably on the way and in a fantastic way as well, looking really, really good. So I like this guy, and the reason why I like this guy so much is because he's very, very grounded. He's very strong. The weight on this miniature is incredible. And what I mean by that, what I mean by the weight, if we start at the focal point of the miniature, which is his face, this is sort of where your eye first meets, and that's partly because of all this negative space up in here, and partly just because, you know, we're naturally attracted to the eyes and, you know, he's sort of looking out at us. So that's the focal point. But if we start off at that focal point, everything from there, everything in the model is pulling downward. It's not just leaning downward, it's pulling downward. So from the way that he's holding the mace, and the line of the mace goes straight down like this, the way that he's holding it suggests that he's pulling it down. Then we have his armor. Everything in his armor is pointing down. These little arrow parts in his armor. Oops. His sword is pointing down. Even these sort of bony things that presumably are holding his cloak are all pointing down. So everything, the tabard, these lines in his tabard, everything is going down. And what that does is it brings the weight of the model down, and it makes it grounded and based. It's a very heavy model. And so we've got this amazing character who's just standing firm and strong. And that strength, that firmness is there in the entire model. So there's some great grounded weight there, but if we have a look at this guy, it's completely the opposite when in terms of weight. So I really like this model as well. Not something that I'm interested in purchasing. I'm not interested in Lumineth really at all, but it's a great model, and its weight is a really important feature of that. So where the vampire was very grounded and all that weight was going down, this guy is very light and all the weight is sort of up here, creating this sense of floating. Okay, so we've got our focal point of this model is probably not the face. It's probably this center area. It's probably this center area in here. But if we have a look at the way that the model is framed, everything is sort of coming upward. So we've got these spikes in the hurricane. Obviously, the hurricane is all coming up, and it's got this beautiful twist to it. Even his horns tapering upward, the quiver of arrows. So here, this model is very light in its weight, and it's sort of floating, which is fantastic and difficult to create. So well done to the designers here. But the other thing about this miniature in particular, and some of the others which I'll get to, is balance. So balance is really important in a model. So this is why, or one of the reasons why the techless model didn't have such a great reception, was because it was so unbalanced in the way that it was composed. Here we've got some fantastic balance. So we've got this sort of main figure here. Okay, now it mirrors this section here, right? Obviously, the bottom section is larger in terms of volume, including negative space, but the top section is much more dense. And so we've got this great balance where we've got a similar shape, and we'll see that triangle repeated in a second, but where we've got a denser shape here, we've got a smaller, denser shape, we've got a larger, less dense shape down here. So we've got this great balance in the miniature, but then we also have balance in terms of shape. So we have these triangles. So we've got this triangle here with his arms, we've got the triangle of the bow, we've got the triangle of the quiver here. We've got the triangle that is his face. We've got the main triangle of his body here, and the opposite triangle of the hurricane. So we've got this repeated triangle pattern. Now, in art, that's called rhythm, where you have repeated shapes or repeated patterns to create flow. And so we've got all these triangles here, which create a very flowing, well-moving miniature. Of course, the spiraling of the hurricane and the twist of the main figure as well contribute to that flow, but that repetition of the triangle there creates some great rhythm and a really balanced miniature. Now the other vampire, let me just get her up. The other vampire is a great display of balance as well, a little bit more simply in the way that her swords, this one is angled down, this one is angled up, and we've got some very literal balance here, particularly if you add in this vertical plane, we have a really well balanced model. Dynamic pose, obviously, but the balance there is really well done. And of course, the other vampire we also have, here we go, really well balanced as well. You see the line of this wing comes down and follows the line of his body and left leg, whereas the line of this wing comes down, follows his body, his arm, and the line of the right wing. And then we've got the volume of the wings here counteracting the volume of the main figure. So we've got some really nice balance in this model. And again, we have lots of downward forces here counteracted by a single horizontal force to create some nice rhythm and balance and flow in this guy as well. So he's pretty cool in the way that he's designed. So weight and balance in these models, I think, is fantastic. Now, the other thing that I noticed in a lot of these guys is tone. So if we have a look at this guy, the Hunter. This is my second favorite mini of the reveal. I really, really like this mini because of the tone that they create in its design. Now, by tone, I'm not talking about value. I'm not talking about contrast, light and dark, that kind of thing. But I'm talking about the mood, the emotive feel of the model. Okay. Now, the paint job obviously is going to help and play into that, but the design itself really creates a specific tone, a specific mood and feel here in this miniature. So the fact that we can only see part of his face in here, that is covered by his hat and this part of his jacket there, already creates a sort of dark, foreboding tone and idea, but then that's carried through with these textures. So we've got lots of different textures here. So we've got the textures, the leather textures of all his belts here, the leather texture in his jacket. Then we've got the wood texture in his stakes, and we've got the metal texture in these armor plates. Whoops, his hammer, this shoulder pad here. So there's a bunch of different textures, but none of them are particularly stand out from the other. They're very natural in the way that they all blend together. And so, we've got this sort of dark, brooding tone that we get from his half-covered face. We've got the darkness in the textures and the similarity between the textures. We've got the broodiness in his stance, the way that he's standing there, again, very strong, like the other vampire that we saw, stakes all leading down. The way that he's standing in that super firm pose, all heading down, his sword pointing down toward the ground, the weight of the hammer facing down. So we've got this very weighty, grounded model, which adds to the darkness of that tone. And then if you contrast that, of course, with this guy who has a very light, breezy, airy tone, you can see what I'm talking about. And then we've captured that really well in the vampires as well. So I don't particularly like this guy staring at his hand. Like that line of sight, he's looking like directly at his wrist, which is kind of really weird. And I don't know why he's looking at his wrist. So I'll probably, when I inevitably buy and paint these miniatures, I'll probably have him looking out a little bit more, because that looking at his wrist is a little bit strange to me. But here, again, we've got this great balance. So we've got this arm is balancing this arm along the fulcrum of his chest. And then we've got this triangle over here creating that nice balance. But in terms of mood and tone, okay, we know that this guy is not going to be pleasant. So we've got, the creases in his forehead. And one of my favorite parts of this model, aside from the bat skull belt down here, which is really cool, but the skull-shaped breastplate. And that brings me to the last thing that I want to talk about these models, and that is their character. And I think character is one thing that Games Workshop does better than just about any other miniature designer out there, or miniature studio out there. They create amazingly characterful models. So this model could have looked cool, and probably would look cool if this was just a standard breastplate like you would get from the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon or something like that, following this very inorganic armor pattern. But they didn't. They wanted to put some character into it. So we've got this amazing skull on his breastplate, built into his breastplate, which shows us that he is not messing about. And then even the hilts of the sword and how elegant they are provide a little bit of extra grace to the models, a bit of gracefulness. And if we look at this one, which is also very graceful, we can see the same thing. Very detailed sword hilts over here to create some great character in the model. Even this, the sword coming in under her hair. Like, that's just it's a small detail, but it's just a really nice touch that creates some great character. And if we have a look at, well, I mean, obviously this guy's just oozing with character, but if we have a look at this guy again, one thing that I really liked here is that there is an arrow missing from the quiver. So it's just a small little detail, but obviously that arrow is this one here that he's got in the bow. So the arrow missing from the quiver makes sense since he's got an arrow in his bow. And I like that the arrow that is missing is the one that he would reach to if he reaches directly behind his back and ridiculously long horns to grab that arrow. So the designer has put some real thought into that little detail. Let's go back to this guy. In terms of character, and that is like the shape of his face here is different to everything else we've seen in Lumineth, but doesn't look out of place. It looks like it's supposed to be there. It looks like it's part of the army, but it's just unique and different, just to create that sense of character. This guy. Here, our character comes in his stance and his weight. That real power. But then, we've got these little details on the base and that kind of stuff. So the designers here, I think, have just smashed it out of the park. They've done a really, really good job. There's some amazing models being released, and particularly in this preview. The Underworld's Warband, these vampires, must buy as soon as they come out. I'll grab them. I convert pretty much every miniature I paint. I won't be converting probably this guy. I won't be converting the lady vampire. As I said, for this guy, I'll probably just move his head a little bit so he's not staring at his wrist. But other than that, I'm going to leave him as he is, just because these miniatures are almost perfect. I'm going to do a head swap here because I'm not a huge fan of that head, as people were saying in the reveal last night, that it's sort of anime hair, Goku style. So I'll probably replace that head. But other than that, I'm not going to do much to these guys at all, because I think they are beautiful. So they're a must-buy for me. Now, Warhammer Quest, not so much, but if this guy gets his own release, 100% he is going into my Witch Hunter Mordheim Warband, just because he is a phenomenally beautiful figure. Just so good, with all those textures, as I was saying before, and the character in him is fantastic. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. As always, stay tuned if you want to hear more of my voice, and hopefully I'll get another painting tutorial out to you within a week or so. Catch us later.